at the Mr. Olympia, and it's got me thinking, who is the strongest bodybuilder of all time, and how did they best manage the differences between training for size and for strength? And so I took to some research, and I should have done this beforehand, but there's one person who stands above all of the rest of the bodybuilders, the professional bodybuilders, when it comes to being strong. And I should have known this because it's a friend of mine. And that friend of mine is none other than the White Rhino, Stan Efferding. Stan is a nutrition legend, and this probably contributes to why he was able to do this so well. But he does my nutrition. He invented the vertical diet. Extremely smart guy. But being smart doesn't move weight, and being smart doesn't necessarily drop your body fat and create muscle bellies and insertions that work really well. Now, before I get into Stan's lift and some of my rationale, I want to talk about why it's actually not the same thing to train for size and for strength, but not necessarily train for size and strength. I've done videos on that before, but why is it that he can have muscle bellies, insertions, joint sizes that are robust enough to powerlift, but small enough to be aesthetically pleasing? And this is the real big challenge. Traditionally, when people who tend to have a body that would be a good physique, when they try to go into strength sports, since their joints are small and more fragile on average, they tend to fall apart really, really quickly. And that just isn't the case with Stan. Despite going through powerlifting and bodybuilding, you can't find anything in terms of substantial injury. And it'd be very easy to pass this off and just say it was different periods in his life, but it just wasn't. So let's talk about it. Stan's best all-time lifts are a 865-pound squat, a 606-pound bench press, and a 838-pound deadlift. These numbers were done under 275 pounds, so this is really the last weight class before they go into an open, no-cap weight class. Now, in 2011, Stan totaled 2,227 pounds in the under 275 class. This broke a world record that stood for 41 years. So when it comes to strength sports, he is at the absolute top. But he's also at the absolute top of the bodybuilding world. Now, he didn't win Mr. Olympia or anything like that, but he did earn his pro card in July of 2009. You ready for something crazy? July 2009, earns an IFBB pro card. In September 2009, 2 months later, he totals 2,221 pounds in a powerlifting meet. He then went on to do 4 IFBB pro competitions, and he was powerlifting in between the whole time. He, in his career, when he was best at powerlifting, he was also best at bodybuilding. And it begs the question, how on earth are you able to do this? And I've come up with 5 reasons and 2 questions on why he might have been able to do this and things that still don't make sense to me. Now, first of all, genetics play an extremely large role in what your maximum lifts are going to be and what your best aesthetic is going to look like. And it's something that cannot be understated. Clearly, he's got genetics that are absolutely 1% of 1%. And he worked really hard to exploit those genetics, which is also something that can't be overlooked. Next up is periodization. And periodization, in this case, is extremely important because you can't be your strongest and your leanest. You can't be aesthetically pleasing and be the best when it comes to strength sports. The reasons for this are many, but really part of it is weight moves weight. Part of it is being lean tends to create a higher risk of injury because your joints are drier. You're going to tend to have joints that are more sore. It's just not a reasonable thing. Someone like Ronnie Coleman was extremely strong when he was lean, but I would have loved to see how strong he could have got if he packed on some body fat. So when it comes to periodization, Stan would have taken his bodybuilding prep and probably still lifted pretty heavy during the bodybuilding prep, but focused on his aesthetics, a little bit higher volumes, dieting down to the show. After the show, his rebound diet would have had him add more weight, and he would have coincided his powerlifting prep with the end of a bodybuilding prep. And this is a really smart way to train, even for an ordinary person, and for myself as well. When I'm training into a show, I'm trying to get as strong as possible. I'm eating extra food. I'm putting on a bit of body fat, and that's okay. That's what I have to do. Then in the off season, I'm going to do a little bit more bodybuilding, try to put on some muscle mass to raise my ceiling for being able to lift weight. We can't forget that the number one correlator to weight lifted is muscle cross-sectional area. So if you can increase the cross-sectional area of the muscle, and then, which he did in his bodybuilding prep, and then you use a strength block or a powerlifting prep to be able to expose that increased muscle cross-sectional area, this is a recipe for success. Now, this brings me to my first question, something that I still don't understand. That's a great recipe for success in theory. The thing that usually doesn't shake out, though, is that Traditionally, people can't do both of those things extremely well. Bodybuilders have small joints, powerlifters have large joints. A powerlifter with large joints or a strongman with large joints, if you diet down, and you step on stage, your huge joints are going to drown out your muscles, and there's no way you're going to look good. So I don't understand how Stan's joint structure supported both bodybuilding and powerlifting. Certainly, there's a genetic component, but there's a level of confusion from my perspective on how on earth he was able to do that. Next up is his diet, and this is Stan's number one area of expertise. It's how I use him, and it's clearly something that's helped him along the way. Oh, yes, diet to get into bodybuilding shape is very important. Dieting to get into powerlifting shape is relatively important. But the one thing that he would have had to do when he went from bodybuilding into a powerlifting show is he would have had to keep systemic inflammation low so that he's able to recover from extremely heavy loads. Meaning that when he puts on body fat after a bodybuilding show, he could not disrespect his body by eating pizzas, ice creams, things that will help you to add fat, but will also cause a huge amount of systemic inflammation. He would have had to eat in excess of reasonably high quality food, something with a reasonable micronutrient profile. Now, he talks a lot, and his big thing is Monster Mash. I use this. And by the way, he also is the one who invented the orange slurry that people have got from me. I do not take credit for this. Orange juice mixed with Greek yogurt is phenomenal. But in terms of getting extra calories, he's got his Monster Mash as a staple. And Monster Mash is either ground chicken or ground beef, rice, some vegetables, some beef or chicken broth. You mash that up, and it's sort of a half solid, half liquid. It tastes way better than it sounds, but it's a great way to get in lots of extra calories. It would have helped him put on body fat if he ate this in excess, and would have helped him keep systemic inflammation low so he was able to go into his bodybuilding prep. Next up is injury risk. Of course, you would have to mitigate injury risk, and there is a level of confusion for me on how his joints held up, but there are principles he would have had to stick by. When it comes to building muscle and bodybuilding, there are multiple ways to skin the cat. You've got people who are very, very low rep and heavy, like Ronnie Coleman. You've got people who are very high rep and relatively light, like a Tom Platz, both of them with huge legs. So the important things when it comes to bodybuilding, and I learned this from Dr. Mike Israetel, are stretching the muscle and working towards failure. Those are really the two things that are important. Outside of that, any rep range from 5 to 25 seems to have very similar results in terms of building muscle. Now, he would have had to tend towards the 5 rep range, and he also would have had to keep compound movements in his training year round. If you do that, you're not going to shock your body so much going from very high reps to very low reps. You go from low moderate reps to very low reps, and that transition is easier. The way that I conceptualize this is from one block to the next, you can only jump 2 qualities. Now, there's 5 training qualities that you can have going to the gym. It is strength, power, hypertrophy, muscular endurance, and aerobic fitness. So in those 5, if you're doing a 25 rep range, you're going to be in the muscular endurance category, and you don't want to jump all the way from muscular endurance to peak strength. We're jumping 3 qualities. So he would have gone from a hypertrophy range or a power range, somewhere in there, somewhere in the 5 to 10, I would guess, or even 3 to 10. And then he would just transition that over into a strength block where, of course, you're doing reps in ranges from 1 to 5. So he used that advantage to be able to pivot easily into powerlifting shows. Now, this is speculation. I'm not him, but this is the only feasible way that I could see this getting done. Next up is when he powerlifted, he did not necessarily look like your ordinary powerlifter. The ordinary powerlifter body fat percentage might be somewhere in the 25 to 35% range, but when you see Stan powerlifting, he might have been 12 to 15%. He still had vascularity all over. He would have still had a semblance of abs, and he would have stayed in reasonable shape. And the really interesting thing about Stan is he won his IFBB Pro card. He also set world records in powerlifting, but it's my opinion that there's no way that he would have accomplished his genetic peak in either, because in powerlifting, having his body fat higher than the 12 to 15% he might have been would have been a competitive advantage. And so he might have actually been a better powerlifter at 300 pounds, but he never got there because that would have taken him so far away from his bodybuilding prep. And vice versa. If he focused on bodybuilding alone and focused more on how you can stimulate muscles for hypertrophy in different ways, and you didn't dedicate time to powerlifting, which isn't the most hypertrophic way to train, well, he would have been even better at bodybuilding. Now, Would he have been would he have been Mr. Olympia? Maybe not, but he certainly would have been a more dominant force already than his IFBB Pro card. Now he topped out coming top 10 at an IFBB Pro show, which is still an incredible feat in and of itself. But I think if Sam focused on bodybuilding only, he likely would have won professional bodybuilding competitions. Now, the second thing that confuses me is the muscle bellies. When you participate in strength sports, something that we have to appreciate and understand is that injuries are always going to happen. Now, whether it's a injury that you actually declare, or it's a bit of a sub injury where you're just sore, you're going to have these little tears that are going to affect your aesthetics when you get down to very low body fat. And this is someone like Terry Holland's biggest downfall is he flexes his muscles, and since he's got tears from all over and surgical repairs, they don't look perfect, which is, for 99% of people fine, but if you're trying to get to the top level in bodybuilding, it's going to be very difficult. So let's just take bicep, for example. If Stan tore a bit of a bicep during training at some point, well, you're going to see some sort of small indentation there when you're trying to pose and when you're down in that lean body fat. And you're going to have those micro traumas all over your body, and that's going to stop you from winning a pro card. So if you want a pro card in bodybuilding, strength sports are not the thing for you. It's just risk reward. You can permanently damage yourself in a way that cannot be repaired aesthetically. So that's my second point of confusion, and I would love to know what you guys think. Pop it in the comments. Did I miss something? What's got you confused? And do you have rationale on how he was able to do both so well? I've given you my 2 cents. I would love to hear your 2 cents. As always, lift heavy, be kind. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel, and we will catch you tomorrow.